The Movie Brats. How film nerds took over Hollywood and totally screwed it up. Hollywood in the 1960s was a time when studios had no idea what audiences wanted. Imagine that. Old men in suits were still greenlighting musicals nobody asked for, and the youth were dropping acid and wondering why every movie still looked like it was made for their grandparents. In other words, very much like our current time. Then, out of nowhere, a gang of highly educated nerds stormed the gates. They studied movies. They took notes. They wrote theses on Eisenstein, who I don't know much about, while other people were ruining literature, art, and music. These filmmakers, known as the Movie Brats, took over Hollywood, gave us some of the greatest films ever made, which doesn't say much, and then quickly crashed and burned. This is their story. So who were these nerds? They were a bunch of young guys in turtlenecks chain-smoking while arguing about Kurosawa's use of negative space, because that's what was happening at USC, UCLA, and NYU in the 1960s. There were 5 key players. Francis Ford Coppola, who was the ringleader, he decided to make gangster movies prestigious instead of things that only your dad liked. Steven Spielberg, the boy wonder. He could direct suspense better than Hitchcock, but with no content or meaning. George Lucas, who took a low-budget space opera and accidentally created Disney's entire business model. Martin Scorsese, the guy who made America realize that mobsters swearing for 3 hours straight is cinema. Brian De Palma, the artsy, chaotic one. If Alfred Hitchcock was more into cocaine, he would be Brian De Palma. These guys didn't just love movies, they obsessed over them. But more importantly, they wanted control. Unlike the directors of the past, who had to listen to executives, these movie brats wanted total creative freedom, and at first, they actually got it. Hollywood let these guys make movies, which turned out to be some of the most important films of all time. So that means they sucked. First up, Coppola. The man who took a simple book about gangsters and turned it into The Godfather. And when the studio tried to fire him, he did what every great director does. He ignored them, went way over budget, and then delivered a masterpiece so good that even the actual mafia respected it. I still don't understand why it's a masterpiece, but whatever. Next, Spielberg, who had a promising young career until he made Jaws and permanently altered Hollywood's DNA. He didn't just direct a thriller about a shark, he created the summer blockbuster. And ironically, the most terrifying thing about Jaws wasn't even the shark. It was the realization that Hollywood had finally figured out how to make money consistently. Way to go, asshole. And then came George Lucas, who took a space western, added laser swords, and convinced children everywhere that they needed to own tiny plastic versions of his characters. Merchandising. Suddenly, movies weren't just movies, they were brands. Studios were foaming at the mouth, counting toy sales before scripts were even written. Oh, hallelujah. What a great world we live in. Meanwhile, Scorsese and De Palma were making movies about crime, paranoia, and psychotic taxi drivers, reminding everyone that, yes, movies could be art. Oh, give me a break. Yeah, right. But also that the Academy really loves movies where men scream at each other in New York accents. For a while, it seemed like the nerds had won, but then they got too powerful. Here's the thing about letting artists do whatever they want. They will absolutely go insane with power, except for real artists. We really shouldn't call these people artists. First, Coppola, who was high off The Godfather's success, decided to film Apocalypse Now, which quickly turned into Apocalypse Later. He went into the jungle to make a war movie and ended up living one. Yeah, you should watch, I forget what it's called. It's a movie about the making of Apocalypse Now. The documentary is called Hearts of Darkness. His lead actor had a heart attack, his budget exploded, and he famously declared, "We had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little we went insane." Which is director speak for, "Oops, I may have lost my mind and spent millions on helicopters." Then Michael Cimino, who I've never heard of, an honorary movie brat, made Heaven's Gate. Oh, that's interesting. So that's where the Heaven's Gate cult came from. Which was a western so overindulgent and financially disastrous that it bankrupted an entire studio. Imagine making a movie so long, so expensive, and so pretentious that Hollywood just says, "You know what? Never again." And thus the golden age of director-driven cinema came crashing down. The studios, now terrified of giving filmmakers too much power, took back control. No more blank checks. No more artistic gambling. Just safe bets. Thus the age of the blockbuster franchise was born. Hallelujah. The movie brats may have lost the war, but they changed everything. Without them, we wouldn't have the modern blockbuster. Oh, heaven forbid. They proved that movies could be both artistic and financially successful, which unfortunately led to Hollywood figuring out that movies could also just be financially successful without the artistic part. Lucas and Spielberg's success with Star Wars and Indiana Jones gave birth to the franchise era. Coppola, Scorsese, and De Palma influenced generations of filmmakers, but the suits learned their lesson. You can be a visionary, but if you start asking for too much creative freedom, they'll slap you on the face and get a dildo, and a studio committee will be on your ass faster than you can say extended universe. And now we live in the post-apocalypse, the post-movie brat world, where cinema is IP-driven, nostalgia-fueled, and owned by corporations bigger than some countries, where movies cost $300 million and have 9 credited screenwriters to make sure nothing too risky happens. Would the movie brats be proud of what Hollywood has become? No. Would they be surprised? Yeah, I think they would be, because I don't think they were very smart. But hey, at least we got some of the greatest movies ever made before everything turned into a CGI theme park. And the greatest movies ever made weren't that great. So thanks, movie brats. You were the best thing to ever happen to Hollywood. Like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, are we living in the cinematic dark ages? Or is this just the next step in Hollywood's never-ending cycle of chaos? Let's argue about it.